All right, so all I want to do right now is show a few techniques and maybe some tiny little licks that you could use on guitar to spice up your lead playing if you're just starting out. Please ignore the hole in my sweater. This is a work sweater, and I'm about to stack some wood. So I wanted to do this because I was just showing somebody these different techniques because they're just starting out with improvisation, and it might give them something to work with. You know, if you just want something to spice things up, to kind of be easy shortcuts, then these might be a couple of ideas. I'm sure to make things like this in the future and hopefully more comprehensive, but let's just get an idea of a few things that you can do. I'm not showing my face because I feel like I just woke up, and I really just don't feel like it. And the focus really needs to be on the guitar anyway. So the very first thing that I want to show has to do with bending, okay? So the first technique would be a unison bend. A unison bend is essentially when you play one note, except you take another note below it, and you bend it up to meet the other note. So if we look here, this is an E, and this is a D. The E is on the 12th fret on the high E string, and the D is on the 15th fret on the B string. And if you play them together, they're kind of dissonant together. They don't sound the best, but they don't sound bad. But then what we can do is we can put our middle finger behind our ring finger here and bend it up. Okay, you notice that I'm not bending this note at all. I'm just bending this note. And you'll notice that sounds a little bit more interesting than if you go to your solo and you just play. Actually, when I was a beginner guitarist, I was wondering how he was, Neil Young was playing this note. I clearly heard it as this note, but it sounded so much cooler. And what I realized is he was doing a unison bend, which he did a lot. Also, Jimi Hendrix, you will notice that he does that a lot, so. So unison bends are a great way to play notes in a more flashy and more powerful way. It's not dissimilar from when in a choir you have, obviously, a bigger choir especially, you have many people singing the same notes. The reason it sounds so powerful is because no matter how you try, you can't make these notes sound exactly the same. If they sounded exactly the same, it would sound like one note, just louder. So let me see if I can get that. It's very close there, but you'll notice there's still some kind of like chorusy effect, which is actually why the effect is called chorus. And you almost can't get it right perfectly anyway. And that imperfection creates thickness. It creates depth, just like in a choir. Okay, so that's one example. Now, basically the formula for a unison bend, if you're playing the note on the high E string, the note below it is typically going to be one string lower and 1, 2, 3 frets higher. So we have the 12th fret on the E string and the 15th fret on the B string. And that continues for the whole guitar on those two strings. And you would always talk about the unison bend as the note that you're climbing up to. So here it would be an A. Good. Now on the B string, it's a little bit different because of the way the guitar is tuned. On the B string, we would play a B unison bend by touching by fretting the 12th fret on the B string and then the 14th fret on the G string, okay? So the distance here is you have the 12th fret and then you would go one string lower and 2 frets higher instead. And I would say those are the two main strings you would want to do that to. I feel like it would be kind of difficult to do it here, like on the G string to the D string. But if you wanted to, the pattern would be the same as the E string. It would be one string down and 3 frets over. So the only exception is the B string, where it's the B string, one string lower, 2 frets higher. All right, and you'll notice I'm putting a little bit of spice on it here. I'm putting vibrato on this here, but you don't have to. You don't have to. And do try and get it as close to the higher note as you can. That would really, really help. And let's take a look at another. I'm doing this kind of on the fly, so please deal with me. The next one would be octaves. And this is actually kind of related because an octave is the same note, technically, like an A or a B or an E, but played across two different octaves. So the note would be exactly 12 frets up if you were going like here to here, 12 notes up in the chromatic scale, or 8 notes up if you're thinking of it like in a major scale. That's not as important right now because, again, we're trying to look for like cheats and shortcuts to playing things. So if we look at the octaves, we're gonna pick a root. So we'll pick a root on the 5th string first. So this note is an E, okay? And in order to play the octave, we would have to go 2 strings higher, 2 frets higher, and we would put our ring finger on that string and our pointer finger on the original note. Let me start that over. If we have the original note, which is E, we're going to go 2 strings higher and 2 frets higher. And we have this, or this. Now you notice I'm getting my other fingers out of the way, but we wouldn't normally do that. We would probably play it like this. If we look close, which I'm going to have to zoom in the video, you'll notice that my pointer finger is lightly touching the E string so that we don't make a sound come from it. And we also notice it's laying on the D string here. Okay, so we're muting the E string and the D string with our pointer finger. We could also mute the D string a little bit with our ring finger if we want. And then additionally, we're kind of letting our ring finger go down a little bit to mute the B string. And also our pointer finger is kind of muting all the strings except for the one that we're playing here. You notice I'm strumming. So it's very, very important not to get those other notes in there. And also not to hold them down too hard. Let me give you 2 different examples. Let's say we're not holding down the notes. If we're not like muting the other notes, it would sound like this, which sounds okay with E, right? But let's try it with C or E flat. Sounds really bad. Now let's say we're holding down a little bit too much, especially on this pointer finger. Now we have a chord. We don't have an octave anymore. All right, so we don't want to do either of those things. So an octave, the formula for that if we have a 5th string root is 2 frets higher, 2 frets over. Boom. It's the same exact thing for the 6th string. Except your pointer finger doesn't have anything additional to mute except for behind it here. And your ring finger has the same basic function. Now when we go to the D string, it becomes 2 strings higher and 3 frets higher. So it would look like this. And with this one, you really can't mute the E string, so you just kind of have to mute the A string and aim, right? With the G string, it's the same thing. 2 frets higher, 3 frets over. And there's your octaves. Now, if you want to play in a particular scale, you would kind of like want to get to know the notes of the scale in here. Like, for instance, if we were talking E major, or if we're talking sunny, right? So you'd really want to get to know your octaves and what notes you're going to play. And you would always refer to your octave. In my opinion, it's best to refer to it as the lower note. So if we're doing an octave on the 7th fret on the 5th string, then it's already implied that this note is going to be there. It's kind of good to just describe it with one note. All right, so there's octaves. Now, there's a couple other little moves that you can use. For instance, this is one I really like a lot, which essentially, let's say we're in E minor pentatonic, which would look like this. I'm sorry. What we could do is we can actually bend up this one note here. It's a really important note. It's basically called the blue note, but what it is an augmented 4th or a flat 5th, we could call it. But if we're looking at the pentatonic scale, it's basically right here. Okay, so if we were to count up the pentatonic scale, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. That's a little confusing when it comes to when you actually learn music theory. It's best to know this as the fourth. Okay, so this is the augmented fourth. We can just look at the shape, okay? And I have numerous charts with the blue note in it. This note right here, you can bend up a half a step, which I think that's a half, or a full step. And you could bring it back down. Right? Or you could just, one thing I really like to do is bend it up, stop it, and then play the minor third right here. Okay, again, we can see that in charts. Okay, another really cool lick that I think is a little more advanced, but definitely something that even a beginner can learn, is something that I definitely heard Pearl Jam play when I was younger, and it looks like this. But it's a pretty standard blues lick. What you do is you would put your pointer finger covering the 12th fret on the E and the B strings just to get them ready. You don't want them to sound just yet. And you bend up that augmented fourth that I had mentioned before. And then you play the B and the E strings. And then you would get your ring finger up here on the 7th, right? On the 15th fret on the B string. And then... and bend that up. Let me rephrase that. Let me start over there. You would bend up your augmented fourth, play the B, and then the B again. Let me start that over. You'd play the augmented fourth. You would stop it, and then play the B string, then the E string, then the B string again, then the D string, and bend it up. So with this, you can just kind of put them all together. You can, intersperse them in the solos you already have. It's just a couple little ideas to spur on some creativity and some, a little bit of spice on your solos. Because if you were to play those things without, putting that spice on, it might look like this. Which still actually isn't bad if you played it right, but you could put a little more on it. And instead of playing just an E note, you could do a unison bend. You could bend up to it. You can also do an octave. So just a few ideas there, and I'm going to stop now.